are kind of old school. These are 120 watt panels. A lot of panels this size or just slightly larger are now 240 watts or more. So these were BP solar panels, what we thought were the best available back in 2003. They have maintained pretty consistent performance, so especially the first 10 years I was really tracking the monthly performance. For a given month throughout the years, it wouldn't vary a whole lot. So there wasn't a lot of degradation. There might have been some slight, but I couldn't tell it within the data. The nice thing about solar is, you know, not on a daily basis, but kind of on a monthly basis, you can pretty much predict what you're going to get. Completely different for the wind turbine. Some of my best days ever in terms of production have been because of wind. If you get a storm blowing through, I've had days where you've got 14 or 15 kilowatt hours of energy out. This is a 1 kilowatt wind turbine, which means that at about 20 mile per hour winds, it should put out a kilowatt of power, which if it does that for an hour, you have your kilowatt hour of energy. If it goes a little bit faster than that, because wind power is a cubic function of wind speed, you can get a lot more power. But if the wind goes a little bit too fast, then it puts the turbine in danger. So if you look at the blades themselves and you look at the fin, you can see that there's an offset. And the design there is such that at high winds, the tail will kick the blades out of the wind so they don't overspin and spin themselves to mechanical failure. That has happened. I've got a couple little videos and pictures of it, you know. It's kind of crazy running out in a windstorm to take a picture of it, but I thought it was cool.
They have just one position for wind, and then until it gets too high, and then they turn into a.
I'm thinking 30 to 40 miles an hour is when it starts to feather. The balance of the forces will start twisting it out, and there's like a spring-loaded thing, which is probably a pretty rusty spring now, so it might have a little more.
Is this a mechanical
resistance.
Action?
Yeah, it is all mechanical based.
At a certain speed, it feathers itself.
It'll start feathering.
It turns.
Right. It'll turn itself in. At some times, so if these are the blades, and this is the wind direction, when it gets fast enough, it will click itself out so that it's 90 degrees, and so it will.
Does it actually stop?
Yeah. So it essentially either stops or it goes really slow. But it's
when
spinning
the wind
up
slows down, it'll switch back. So wind comes in gusts. You know,
right.
Keep going back and forth and back and forth.
It would, yeah, as long as it's working properly, yeah.
What makes the blades face into the wind?
The tail.
But
It's a little bit off, yep.
Is it supposed to be off, or? It looks way off.
I don't know, Dick.
Yes. Yeah. That helps it get started when it wants to feather. And they'll end up the props here and the tail over about maybe 10 or 15 degrees off.
Does it ever face directly into the wind, or is that tail always kind of determine the direction?
Well,
we need some wind.
We do need some wind. It's definitely the tail that is the directional control for the turbine.
Because the whole thing can spin around any direction.
That's right, yeah.
It'll go, totally turn, just totally free, turn either way.
It will, I haven't seen it happen yet, but because it is wired, unless you basically twist your wires to the point where it's restricting the motion.
Yeah, I don't understand.
Have you ever seen that happen?
I'm not sure what this one has internally, but a lot of them have slip rings.
Okay.
So it can go around as many times as you want. They have basically copper rings and brushes, and it will allow you to make contact and not have to twist the wire up.
So they're not actually wires connected to the turning thing.
Since I haven't brought it down, Dovetail told me there were, but I don't know for sure. They told me that there was a possibility that it could twist itself.
That'll be one of the inspection points to see how it was engineered, and if there's anything has developed in terms of the slip ring conditions or the wiring and bearings and all that.
Yeah. So Dovetail Solar and Wind did it back in 2000.
So what percentage of your energy comes from wind?
In a year, do you have that?
I don't have it broken out by that. But my estimates over the years have always been, this is a 1 kilowatt wind turbine and a 1 kilowatt solar array. Probably about 65% from the solar and 35% from the wind. And that might be being a little generous for the wind. It might be less than that.
You cannot track them separately.
I don't have any automated systems. There's meters inside which you can show that are telling you the instantaneous output of either one of the systems.
But if both systems are feeding into it, there's only one meter.
So there's a wind controller and a solar controller, and then I have the actual meters where they're combined. So the only way that I could tell how much my wind turbine actually put out with my current metering system would be to put a little camera on it and to monitor it and add it all up. When I put the system in, I thought about putting in monitoring, but it actually uses energy to monitor your system. So I decided that...
And then it turned out you had that energy.
Yeah, I guess I should have. I don't have any continuous monitoring of this system. There's some systems down at the university that we have some continuous monitoring on, solar, not the wind systems.
So do you brush the snow off in the wintertime?
So I do. So that's one of the nice things about the ground mount is that that's one of my morning rituals in the winter is to come out and to brush them off if there's been any snow, or to just give them a look. This is the simple shade stick that you use to try to figure out whether or not you need to change the angle. Obviously I can't track the sun, but I can tilt to try to get the most out of the panels. In this latitude, you would set your panels at about 40 degrees, 40 to 42 if you had fixed panels. In this system goes up to about 70, so you want them as high as you can in the winter because the sun will be lower on the horizon, and then in the summer it gets to about 15 degrees, I think. I can't get to flat, but just because of some limitations on the system.
Would you demonstrate how that tells you when to adjust the panels, how that thing...
This isn't ideal because you can see that we have a lot of the shadow is going to the side, but if we had the sun right above us and you use this little shade stick and you had it perfectly, what should you see?
No shadow.
No shadow, right. So it's just a matter of trying to figure out how do I get the tilt such that, in this case...
I want the shadow vertical.
Right.
So if you were to adjust it right now to make it perfect, how would you turn the panels?
Looks like I need to, if I could, I would drop them a little bit
you
farther.
Can't, that's fair.
I'm at my...
But if you could,
limit.
you would lower the panels until it was like that.
Correct.
But you would only do this like at 1 o'clock, which is...
So I would test,
yeah,
at solar noon, so that it was
right,
a little bit easier,
right.
as long as you can figure out well enough where the shadow is falling.
How often do you actually do it?
So all of my answers are before Lois and after Lois. So before, when I was living here most of the time, then I would do it at least once a month. I wouldn't adjust it every time, but I'd check and then decide when. And I got into a pattern of adjusting about 6 times a year. So about every other month is what made sense.
Is there a crank?
No, it's simply some tension bolts, and you can do it, I can do it by myself. I just loosen the bolts, lift it up a little bit, and retighten the bolts. So
And one at a time.
one. So there's 4, actually it's a 4-panel unit and a 4-panel unit. So
These bolts here?
So there's, if you look in the back, there's telescoping. So they're both, it look just like that, but there's just a telescoping leg in the back that allows you to
Do they
change.
move individually or the whole?
If you kind of look, there's 2 racks. So these 4 panels and these 4 panels.
So you loosen all the bolts and then you can lift them all at once and then tighten.
Exactly.
What kind of maintenance do you need to do for this and for that?
So for these outside panels, it really is a matter of keeping the grass down. When I started, I had gravel all the way out to, I think, somewhere around here, and so it's still underneath here. So trying to keep it so that you don't have to mow near it, and but weeds eventually win.
Got away from you.
If
you had a mulcher mower, it wouldn't matter, right?
I'm not very good at mowing very much because I only use my electric mower and I don't use it very often, and so
You need a goat?
I need a goat. And we've talked about
Probably
goats.
this wiring.
Yeah.
Oh, that would not be good.
No.
We talked a little bit about brushing snow off and stuff, but
Right.
for the panels themselves, it's just been a matter of keeping them. In the summer, they are a little dusty. It's rained kind of recently, and but I probably should be out here with my hose. And
You do hose them off.
I have hosed them off, yeah. Usually after dry parts of the year, not when it's.
Now, the new solar panels, do all of them have the built-in little current to melt the snow? Because I know the ones I
The
got
ones I
mine
just put in don't.
from 09.
I don't know if you can get them. Maybe you can get
But
them.
I've heard that
Okay.
newer ones do, but maybe you have to specify. There are kind of
Okay, extra.
I'm sure
Yeah.
it's
I
an
would imagine.
Yeah.
optional thing. So
Yeah.
where does this current come from?
It would have to come from.
Well, if you got a sunny day, it'll melt.
Energy, unless it's stored it
I
somehow.
mean, is it
So
powered?
often when it's snowy and cold, you have really bright sunny days. So
Yeah.
it's a pain to have snow on your panels.
Yes,
So
it is.
there's heating elements in the panels, and they connect to your power supply. Like
Well,
the
I don't know.
grid?
I don't know how they're powered. I'm assuming that the power is supplied somehow.
What is the lifespan?
What we know about solar panels, what I know about just researching them, is that 25 to 50 years is likely. The nice thing is it's really not the cells themselves that are going to degrade, but it's the balance of the system. So you're going to get a leak or something, or there's going to be some wiring or. Yeah.
And is that repairable, or?
I don't know.
You aren't there yet.
Anything's repairable, but it's a matter of whether it's cost effective to repair it or not.
And the thing is, if the new panels are so much more efficient, it's very tempting to say, oh,
Yeah.
we'll just do that.
Yes.
And they're so cheap.
Welcome.
What about the maintenance? She asked about the maintenance.
the maintenance.
here, like,
You climb up there and clean it off.
does it need to be lubricated?
Yeah, that's what I'm
is it
wondering.
Sealed, some sort of sealed bearings, or what?
The user manual says that you should do certain inspections annually, and then actually either climb or drop the tower. It's not all that easy to do. So the only inspections I've done is walking out, looking up, and seeing, oh, it's still turning. It still seems to be okay, which is not the way it should be, but that's just the way the reality has been. So this is what a turbine looks like that has not been dropped in 15 years.
You never dropped it?
I've never dropped it, no.
So how do you drop it?
So Dick is working on that. He's going to help me. We had planned on trying to have it drop this weekend so that when you came,
really?
Oh
yeah.
my gosh.
But some of the truck that he had and some of the details didn't work out, so we thought that would be kind of cool to have it down. But
So you use a big cable winch and just sort of hook it on there and lower
yeah,
it?
Dick, do you want to talk a little bit about what the plan is?
Tower here is 70 feet. Got to make sure you're that far away from your house when you go that way.
So if you see the carport, there's a reason that it stops right there, because that's exactly where the turbine drops. Right, if it were to, yeah, and it will hopefully this next month, but it'll come up within about 2 to 3 feet of the house.
You can guide it pretty easily. You're
It's
not
going to be
hit your
interesting.
tree.
Yeah, it basically, it's a controlled lowering. I avoid saying the word drop. Lower and raise.
Yeah.
Okay, controlled.
What is the maximum force on whatever you're pulling or stopping it or pulling?
I can't give you a figure, but when it gets to about 30 degrees above the ground, you're at maximum stress. And that kind of pull at that point would probably be easily 12 to 1,500 pounds. We've got a 8,000 pound winch system I designed for dovetail. It's been used in several applications. It's an automotive type of winch that runs off the vehicle battery that you're. Well, I pull my out back into here. Specially made jumper cables using essentially loading cable and quick disconnects for ease of use. Put it down, and the winch will actually fit in right about here and have 4 legs on it to keep it lined at the right angle. 12-volt jumper from the car and a remote control button. And essentially then, once you're all locked in with the winch, then the safety cable can come off and you're ready to let it go. This is the main restraint cable, safety cable.
You should invite us back for this.
It all has to be protected before you turn it loose.
You have
I
insurance
can
on
let
this?
Ed know when Dick doesn't want too many people around when we do that. Some safety issues. But once it's down, we can let you know if people want to stop by and look at what it looks like
So
up close.
it's going to move towards the house?
There's
Yes.
you can see there's a hinge point right there, so it can only
It only goes that way.
It looks quite a bit like a mast on a sailboat and a boom. Very, very similar looking. It's going to be interesting to see what this early turbine, it's the first brand that Dovetail engaged with, and it's a Chinese manufacturer, American Renewable Power, was the company that brought that forward from China, rather. And then that gave rise to a company called American Renewable Energy, ARE. And then they started building turbines based on what they learned about these. So those got better and better, and I'm really tickled that they had got this far with no attention. Yeah. So that speaks well for what the Chinese did with this particular design. So part of the procedure once it's down is to take it apart enough to look for all the effects of being moisture and dry and tight and vibration free and abrasion free, all the various things that work on mechanics. Be able to have it in the condition you can put it up for 15 more years and forget it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Not worry about
That would be
it.
ideal, yeah.
And a little bit of aesthetics at the same time.
So when do you then undo the guy wires? Is that after you, I mean, it has to be before you have the lowering.
Connected
just lower?
before the lowering, you lower the tower,
Those
and
wires
it comes
stay
in,
on.
will come into a cradle to hold it up at work height off the ground,
Yeah.
and then it stays, really, the tower stays
Those
connected.
cables on that side just go flat.
Yeah, they will just fall out of the
Okay,
way.
but
They
what
can
about-
be guided out of the way.
But what about these? Oh,
Because of the way they're attached here, if you
Okay,
look.
so the boom,
Yes.
the equivalent of the boom moves up.
That's right. Right, it'll stay stretched, and then
So it's like a right angle in the whole thing.
right,
Exactly.
right.
Just use that in here. Oh,
Yeah.
Correct.
Around that one pivot point, yeah.
So why do you have a 70-foot tall tower?
Oh, because I couldn't have a 300-foot tall tower. For wind power, you want it as high as possible. And you're supposed to be 30 feet higher than any surrounding trees or buildings. Beyond this fence is not my property, and I wasn't going to move the house, so it was basically how big can you make it so that you can not be too, be within legal limits here and not hit the house.
Okay.
So that came out to be about
So you would have
70.
gone higher. All right.
Well, that was my limit, right. So it would be better to be higher because then you have a better chance of getting more sustained winds. They have less ground effect, but there's always limitations. And so,
So what about the ridge top effect? I see, if the wind's coming from there, you have the benefit of the ridge.
that's right. Yes, a couple reasons I have a hybrid system and not just more solar power, solar panels. And one is when we looked at the wind maps and we did a few just handheld anemometer tests. What you normally would do before you do a commercial scale wind turbine is put a tower up and do some wind measurements across the course of at least months, if not a year, so that you had a good idea what the wind resource was. We just did a few different days, put up a wind meter in your hand, and my experience of living up here was that, wow, it seems like there's a lot of gusty winds. Let's give it a try. When you look at the wind maps, there is a kind of a funneling effect from these valleys that helps a little bit, quarter mile or half a mile kind of a section through here. This is not a great wind location, but I chose to go ahead with the wind turbine because I really did want to balance my production and so across the year that I could cover all my electrical use, and in the winter the turbine does much better than the solar because you got the short days obviously and less of a resource. The whole purpose of the hybrid system was to get some data on how well do those two things overlap and how consistent can your average power be by combining the two rather than just having a lot more in the summer with the solar and a lot less in the winter with the wind.
Has it paid for itself?
It's a question I always get. The short answer is probably no. Why? When you don't use a lot of electricity, you don't have a very big bill. So my bills before I put this system in were, $10 to $20 a month. So I was very conservative. It takes a lot. So if you say, would I have continued to be that conservative or about so? It takes a lot of years or a lot of months at $20 to pay for the system. When I put the system in, there was a distributed energy resources grant. The first 3 years I was required every month to submit a report on how it was working, whether there were any maintenance issues, what the actual production was, what I've learned. And the state of Ohio was supposed to get that from various different people and then determine if having distributed resources like this was better than having concentrated resources like the power plants.
What do you eat with in your
Yeah.
house?
Okay. So two
Gas.
questions.
Gas.
Um,
Oh, gas.
So yeah, so there's natural gas on my neighbors,
Ah,
and so I have gas heat. I'm able to cover my electrical energy use with these systems. So it was a state of Ohio grant. They paid 50% of the system. So back in '03, this was a ballpark $20,000 system all in for the solar, the turbine, the tower, all the control system inside, all the wiring, all the installation. State of Ohio paid about $10,000, and I paid $10,000, and then provided those years of
That's
data for
pretty
them.
reasonable.
So yeah,
I
so,
mean, it's just your fault that you use a little electricity.
not complaining. I'm happy that I did it, and I'm happy that I've had both systems. But if I was going to add anything, or if I was going to, so I probably won't put a lot of money into the wind turbine. I'd love to get it continue operating, and put whatever money we have to keep it operating. But this part of the country, good or bad, the solar is going to be much more my experience has been the solar is much more consistent, reliable, and dollar for dollar probably a better investment.
What's the minimum wind speed to get the turbine to move?
Ballpark 6 miles per hour, 5 to 6 miles per hour. It could probably start moving before that, but there's enough losses in the line, you won't see any power out the other end. So it might rotate a little bit, but you need about 6 miles an hour to get
To overcome the forces. What about any sort of regulations? Did you have to get any sort of approval or anything to do this?
Oh.
Paperwork with somebody, the FAA or somebody?
Dovetail took care of those things. Because we're out in the country, I think there was a lot less. I don't remember that being a problem. And the tower's not high enough to cause any issues with flight regulations or anything else.
What's the biggest wind turbine you could put on that tower?
Maybe a 10K?
I would say more like 3 to 5.
3 to 5, I think.
10K is it's pretty good size, and the weight is involved.
So it's the weight and the wind force too?
It would be way too much for this tower to go to a 10.
It'd probably take a lot more wind to get it moving, wouldn't it, or not? Maybe it'd be more efficient. Maybe the newer ones are more efficient.
So I bet there are newer ones. This was supposed to be at the time, again, this is a long time ago, the best low speed, the one that would give us the opportunity to pick up the lower speeds. I think it has worked in that effect, but I hope over the last 15 years there's better options.
So does bigger mean that you need a higher wind speed because it's a heavier system or not?
So there's more inertia to get the rotor moving, but I haven't looked directly in terms of how big that effect is. And it depends on your bearings, depends on a number of factors.
Right. Several things at play there. That the break loose speed varies on all those things added together. They're all factors, 4 or 5 different basic items.
But in general, larger would mean more inertia, which means it would take more force to get it moving, yes. Right.
Well, it's producing more force, so.
Yeah. Besides lack of wind, the one time or 2 times now that it hasn't spun is we've had some good ice storms. And so it's been through hailstorms, it's been covered with ice. I don't know if you remember, we had like a 1/4 to a 1/2 inch of ice that one year. So it took about 2 weeks for it to thaw. And I wasn't sure whether it would ever spin again because it was covered with ice. And but then eventually it did. So,
Would it be better to be black then, in that case, to melt faster?
because I don't think like for the white roof, the reason I have a light colored roof is because it keeps the cooling bills down, and that's worked quite well. In the summer, I'm not sure that is there anything up there that could overheat, Dick?
That's a good point, yeah.
Where we're having it to be. So the question is to have it black so that it would have less chance of icing up in the winter.
Turbine blades, are you speaking of, or?
Yeah,
what?
there's just the whole system. He said it froze up and took a couple of weeks, but I was thinking if it were black or a dark color, that maybe the sun might melt it when it came out faster if it was black.
Sounds like a good theory to me.
But he was asking if it would overheat
Yeah.
in the sun, like in the summer. Is there anything that would be affected by it overheating if it did?
Well, if you had heavy wind loads and you're running near capacity, and I think there are diodes in the head, the temperature of those diodes would be the most delicate thing I'm aware of. There's some ventilation hole type flow through kind of feature, but I don't think there's any insulation involved. That would be an invitation for any bugs that could get in there.
How about moving to the shade to continue discussion?
Speaking of shade.
The distance from the house or the distance from the inverters is concerned just in terms of line losses, so you don't want the system to be too far away. The way we have this system set up is a grid-connected battery backups. I am connected to the grid, so I can receive and give power to the grid, but because I'm pretty far out, we used to lose power consistently. You know, maybe 5 to 10 times a year you'd lose power for some amount of time. They're getting better in terms of getting it back on, but still, so I wanted a battery backup system so that when the grid was down, if you don't have battery backup and your grid tied, you can't produce. Yeah, you don't have power just like everybody else. I didn't want to be off-grid because there's some benefits, if you especially want to do net metering, to be grid connected. Yeah. So my system, it's a little bit more expensive when you install, but it's basically grid connected with a battery backup. So I have a small battery system. There's 4 large kind of marine style batteries.
Can you show us that? Did you put that in at the very first?
Yes.
Along with the whole system?
That's right, yeah. I've had to replace the batteries once, and it was after, it was a year and a half to 2 years ago. It was after about 13 years of operation. When we talked about maintenance and we started talking about the outside maintenance, the thing that requires kind of a little bit more attention is the batteries. The batteries I have need to be watered. They need to be equalized and watered occasionally, and several times a year. And if you don't do that, then your batteries are likely to have a lot less life. So that was about $1,000 expense, I think, replacing the batteries.
So
Yeah.
what, they want your refrigerator to be working, assuming that they have gas and so the fan on their
Yeah.
gas furnace, you
Yeah.
know, there's certain really basic things that...
There's certain core loads, and so I have my furnace fan, my refrigerator, a bank of lights, a bank of outlets that you can use when you're running just on battery.
Aren't there maintenance-free batteries? I think that's kind of what we have. We don't have to do any maintenance on it, which is kind of
Or
nice.
supply.
Yes.
And that's what you have too,
Thanks.
right?
Yeah,
You have the maintenance-free.
glass absorbed mat, they're called.
Yeah, Yeah.
It's still lead acid, but I don't understand it, but you don't have to add water.
yeah.
No, it's just they're free. Until, I don't know. I don't know how long. We've had our system since 2013. It's only 5 years,
Yeah.
I guess.
We've had our system like that too.
That's
Yeah.
great. Way back in '03, we looked at the different prices, and that was the best option. So when I replaced, I looked at whether or not it would be easy to convert over, and in the end, I just decided to buy batteries that were similar to the ones I had because it's for total cost benefit kind of thing.
Was it hard to convert over though?
I was going to have to make a few changes, and I just didn't have the time. It wasn't not necessarily was hard, but
You just didn't want,
I'm
it was too
I don't have-
complicated. It just,
at this time in my life, it was too complicated.
Yeah.
There's a lot of times in my life where it wouldn't have been too
So
complicated.
you use 4 marine batteries.
Yeah,
That's it.
that's right. Yeah, and you can look at them. It's if anybody wants to see, you can look at the inverter and the charge controllers for the wind and the solar and the battery system, etc.
I think Third Son told me that they have inverters now that you can plug into when you have no electricity and you can get, but I don't.
My inverter, I believe, does have some side plugs as well.
But of course it's not storing it, so that's only
Yeah.
good for
when the sun is out.
That is nice, yeah.
That's something though.
Yeah,
That's better
right.
than no batteries.
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
Or no
Yeah,
plug-ins.
then no power, yeah.
Well, you can keep talking inside and move to the batteries equipment room.
That's a surprising pantry.
Oh yeah. Wow. Well, that's a good use of a closet.
Yeah.
Some of the interesting things are, over here is the dump load. So when the wind and the solar are both producing, or if the wind is producing very high, my inverter is sized for 2 kilowatt, I think. It's got a little bit of overage. There's a certain power limit, and you can fry your inverter if you have too much power coming in. If the wind is putting out too much and my inverter can't handle it, it'll get diverted to, and basically it's just a resistor bank, and it'll just start glowing and be nice and warm. So that you would only have if your potential power production could exceed your inverter capacity, because that'll help just protect the electronics.
That's because of the wind.
And that's because of the wind, because
Solar panels won't do that.
That's right. So they're so predictable, right? The wind is so unpredictable and can be, especially when you have both systems and maybe it's a sunny day and there's wind. So there's a lot of scenarios that you could overproduce your inverter. But if you have solar, you know what your max capacity is going to be.
If you have solar and somehow reaches the max of the inverter, won't the solar panels just shut down the zone? If there's no place for the power to go, we quits going.
I guess there could be that electronics built in. Dick, do you know if their systems generally have that electronics? I'm not aware of that, but...
My understanding was if there's no place for the electricity to go, then it doesn't go. You can't keep generating electricity if there's no place for it to go.
No see?
That might be true, but I tell those photovoltaic panels that all they know is photon comes in, electric goes out. Tell them to stop. In my understanding, there'd have to be some type of a electronics that would divert or that would create enough of a resistance to that so that it couldn't go. The batteries are in a little box right here. They're right there. They're not all that exciting. They look like batteries, but there are 4 of them. They're set up so that if you read out on the solar boost there, you can see it's reading about 52.2. That's the voltage level currently in the battery bank. So they're hooked so that we have higher voltage, lower current, and that's just to reduce the line losses in terms of the transmission from the production point to the inverter. It's a solar controller. It can show you what currently, right now, because the sun is so late in the day, the output charge current is 2.6. So we can multiply our 2.6 amps times our 52.2 volts and get our current power. We have an analog for the winds. You can tell what it's producing if you're looking at it, but otherwise I don't have it constantly monitored. These are the meters that the electric company, AEP, put in order to track what's going into the grid and what's coming from the grid generally. And then there's an outside meter, which is one of those electronic meters now, or a smart meter, that they can monitor that and handles the net metering.
What is your grid fee?
My grid fee?
Yeah. They charge you a fee just to be connected, whether or not you use any electricity, right?
It's $5.
You pay that regardless of how much you sell to them?
Yes.
How come I'm getting 0 electric bills? I just got a system put in a year ago.
So hopefully,
0.
yeah, that's awesome. Hopefully that is changed. For a long time, no matter what, I would get a customer fee or a connection fee. Yeah.
Your connection is $30 a month.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know how agreements get changed and how things, but it sounds like some other people have better agreements than I have.
If it gets high enough, you might just say, I'm not even going to connect to the grid. I mean, I'm going to charge you enough money.
Right.
My understanding is, in the summer when you're generating a lot of electricity and you're generating more than you use, and the credit will pay for these other fees.
Yeah, that's
But then in the winter, you use up that credit. But as Greg already said, if over the course of the year you end up positive, generating more than you use, then you'll get a nasty letter.
Well, I won't do that. But Carol Beal,
I don't understand her situation.
that's a hush hush. And when I produce more electricity than I use, I still have to pay like $12. I have to pay,
So everybody has different amounts that they pay.
Yeah, it's funny, yeah. It is interesting.
I wonder if it's based on what county you're in.
But I've been producing possibly as much as 200 to 300 for in the summer.
You're an all-electric house, too.
Well, it's an all-electric house.
They'll do sweet deals with people that...
Yeah, because in the winter I had, my highest bill was $175.
They want you to cut out everything except electricity, and they'll do really good deals for you for that.
So they found out about your gas.
Well, I guess my bills are low enough that they knew that I wasn't just electric.
The gas that you get, does that have to be cleaned up, or can you use it straight from the...
Pretty much is a direct line from a well right in the neighbors. I don't know if there's what filters. I'm sure there's some simple filters and stuff, but there's no it doesn't need to go to any processing or anything. It basically comes right in here and that's what we use.
Whoever owns it
Yeah.
has to swab it periodically to get the gunk and water and things out of it.
And what does that produce? Fracking fluid.
Well, we actually have
No, this has nothing to do with no fracking going on. No fracking.
petroleum. It looks like
It
oil.
still has to be disposed of in some injection well or something.
The impurities.
Whatever they get out of there, it has to be disposed of in an injection well.
Yeah.
It's not much though. It's not like, if you have a small gas well, it's not much.
Right. Right.
I don't know how much it is.
We can show
20
you.
gallons a year.
Oh, you have a well?
Yeah, he
Yeah.
swabbed it. He
That's right.
invented some swabbing device. Took all, like 6 months to design this thing, but yeah.
What do
Yeah.
you do with your
Well, there's
swabbing fluid?
an 80-gallon tank that sits there and accumulates fluid, and then
Other energy efficient appliances you have here? It's not sexy, but it's just an Energy Star, very simple refrigerator, and replacing the old refrigerator I had with this one did more good than putting in a solar panel. Putting in a whole bank of solar panels. So I went through the whole house with, there's nothing really special about it, but it's just one of the simple Energy Star models, and it itself is a number of years old, but as long as you keep it clean, it's done a good job. I had I think it was called a kilowatt meter. I still have it at school. Basically, I went through the whole house and made sure that I knew exactly what my loads were, and especially, you've heard the term phantom loads, the things that are plugged in and are using electricity, whether or not you're benefiting from them or not. Luckily, I don't have time to watch TV and don't really care about TV, so I don't have any TV or any other electronics like that. I have a radio, but it never really gets plugged in. So I just tried to go around and try to figure out what are the uses and how do I get rid of all the uses of electricity. My main electrical uses are just the refrigerator and fans and...
What do you say your second biggest user is?
I don't use the air conditioning much, but probably the times that I use it, if you average that out, it's going to be, I have a heat pump, so it's relatively efficient.
Where do you think the dryer comes out on the...
So it's a gas dryer, so it does have a slight amount of electrical use, but very low. Usually I don't use a dryer, I usually hang things. I have a gas stove.
Hot water heater?
So hot water heater is gas, yeah. That's one of the things that allows me to keep my overall electrical use low, is to have the key things that, especially anything related to
Probably
heat.
gas is over half your energy, household energy use.
Yeah, I still don't use much. I mean, I'm very conservative with that as well. Yeah.
Heating and hot water, right?
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
you have a gas meter, or you just buy it for
It's just a fixed price, and so I really don't know how much gas we use. There's no real way to
That's
meter it.
usually the way it goes around here.
Did you make any energy saving changes in your house? Increase insulation, better windows?
So yes, I did invest in windows years after I bought the house. So this house was built in the 70s, I guess. I bought it 20 years ago, 1998. So adding insulation a lot, changing. Just a couple years ago when I needed to change the roof, I looked at what the best options were and ended up with a light colored metal roof, and that has helped keep the cooling loads down. Because most of the other things were related to keeping appliance, energy use down.
Light bulbs.
All the bulbs are LEDs. So yeah, all of the cabinets, all the countertops, light fixtures, shelving units, they're all reused. When I needed to do some changes, I didn't want to buy anything new, and so even the microwaves and some of the other appliances, I used the Habitat Restores a lot. Unfortunately, that meant I had to drive to Columbus a few times because our Restore doesn't have quite the same selection as they do. But overall, trying to keep resource use down by trying, in all cases, to buy used rather than new if possible. Building your own stuff.
And how many hours a day would you say that you're here? Are you at work like a full day?
So most of the time that I've been here, just me, and I used to do a lot of things in the community, so I would only be here from about 9 p.m. till 7 a.m. or 8 a.m.
Somehow you get to work.
And I bike commute. So the majority of the last 20 years, through all 4 seasons, I've used my 2-wheel.
Fun going to work, but coming home after a long day's work.
I come up Rock Riffle. It's fun. It's a way to decompress from the day, and once you're up the hill, you're done with work. It's behind you, and you're on.
It's those big swords there. Wow.
Yeah.
And the next one will be a little different. It's called an edible forest garden. There's somebody out near Amesville who has kind of done a permaculture forest garden setup on their property.
Awesome.
And I thought, well, that'll be something interesting.
Yeah.
We do have a Facebook page, which I am struggling to learn how to do. And these items are posted on the Facebook page, which is Ohio SLN.
I challenge you to a duel!
9, 10, revolve and shoot!
Blair's just died.
Oh.
No one will lay the least blame on your daughter. There's bound to be hideous talk.
Ruth will be far away from it. She's going to spend the summer with her married sister in New Hampshire.
Has he told her yet?
I can't strike her down like that. She won't be able to bear it.
I'm glad that thee could cry so hard, dear.
What would you like to talk about?
What was the promise you made to Monkey Blair?
Are people talking about me? Young Dana. I made a promise to him that seemed to calm him.
He bought me out. I didn't want him to. It's such hard work to get more.
She only wants my innermost secrets.
That's the hired girl, Delma. They always mind her, because if they don't, she'll leave, and then they'll have to do all her work.
You people think I'm funny?
Nothing ever happens in dear sleepy old Walpole.
He hates to see children run and have fun.
Get off my grass!
What is the matter? We're on Uncle Alonso's side now.
And what if we are?
Everybody's afraid of Uncle Alonso.
Get off my grass!
Please stay. I know you don't want to, but the only way to get along with him is to do exactly as he says.
Oh, well then of course I'll stay. I'd love to.
Walpole is such a pretty village. The foliage, of course, isn't as luxurious as we have it in the South.
Get the pies.
do you make each day?
12. Papa doesn't like to have people talk at the table.
Go in the cellar and sprout them potatoes.
I thought you were going to go. Where's your son Henry?
Why, Henry's gone to situate.
To situate what?
To situate.
Situate is a verb, Mr. Burbank, and therefore requires an object.
He went yesterday.
Is that pretty high school's teacher still courting Henry?
You hit it right, Sophie. I guess she is.
I saw Henry 4 weeks ago on Sunday afternoon walking down our lane with his arm around that teacher.
Promise me that you shall never go near that house alone.
He doesn't scare me one bit.
Surely you don't think that I find him attractive.
No, but he thinks that you are.
But he's married.
That, dear, does not matter.
Are you the man who says he has no gift for his chosen calling?
I'm not anything, and I never can be.
Oh, Reverend Brown, I am delighted you could join me. Your company is so enjoyable. Reverend Brown, this is Martha's sister, Miss Ruth Holden. This is the Reverend Bartholomew Brown. He's new to our parish.
How do you do, Mr. Brown?
Well, no, I can't think of a thing, Elizabeth. Thank you. Shall we go?
Hurry! Charles and Elmira heard the train and they will be expecting us.
Charles didn't hear it.
Elmira heard it and told him.
Sarah!
Charles!
I know just how much Elizabeth gave you and just how much she's going to give all the rest.
What in the world has brought you to Walpole?
We had an engagement for tonight. Or have you forgotten?
An engagement?
It's the Clinch Rifles ball.
Oh, of course.
I was running an errand at the Augusta train station the other day, and there was Monty, wilder and crazier than ever.
It only took Ruth less than 24 hours for her to cast her spell over him.
You've seen his mother?
Why, yes. And she couldn't understand how Windsor had been swept up by you in only 3 days. Well, I told her about Dave, and I told her all about Augusta.
Martha says Walpole dearly loves gossip. I don't want to be gossiped about when I haven't done anything.
Except fall in love with another man.
What did you Or did you laugh?
What, by the way, is the price of potatoes nowadays in Boston?
I believe they're 5 cents a hundredweight.
Well, I shall send you 2 barrels of my best potatoes, along with a barrel of my fall-grown apples and my northern spies.
Oh, you're so kind. I'm terribly fond of your apples.
Money is the only thing that works for you day or night. How wonderful it is to think of it there in the bank, rolling over and over, gathering interest.
This is my room.
It's mine! Aunt Elizabeth, when I think of your magnificent bed on Beacon Street, your dressing room, and your private bath, and your personal maid, I think it is just too lovely of you to want to call this little room yours.
Maybe someday little Sophie will grow up and have just as splendid a house as I. I am now ready to hear from the children.
A little boy got out of bed, 'twas only 6 o'clock. The boy then slammed the window down, to a fence the old bird flew, flapping hard his two-winged brown kite, cock-a-doodle-doo!
Next child.
I love the boys, and the boys, and the boys love me. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
We are all glad that you are perfectly sure of the days of the week, Dana.
Let the little boy tell his auntie why he recited the days of the week over and over so nicely.
Over the days you are going to spend in Walpole. It's 2 weeks, and I said every single day.
Bless the boy. I have some presents for all the children. Who are those 2 young men from the south who are staying at the tavern? Suitors? I was fortunate in making a great marriage. If things are handled properly, you could make a marriage even greater than my own. Do you care for young Windsor?
Oh, yes. Oh, I do.
Then if that is the case, I'm sure that Mrs. Windsor would not expect you to allow 2 eligible young men to stay in town. I might even have the wedding at my house on Beacon Street.
Oh, dear.
Get rid of those preposterous non-entities.
I'm not gonna shoot him. I'll look forward to exposing him later.
There must be some mistake about Mr. Windsor. Even if he has done this dreadful thing, I shall stand by him all the more.
I know. But meet me back here tonight.
Hey, what are you drinking?
Hard cider. One of them southern gentlemen who's after Ruth Holden.
Not in the way you think.
Well, I'll give you a glass. I'd advise you not to take it.
Never was a man that didn't want to marry that girl. My brother died on account of her.
Mr. Leroy, are those young men going home to Augusta tonight?
Yes, indeed, madame.
I'm very pleased. Tell your cook not to put soda into her sponge cakes while I'm here.
I was perfectly crazy to meet you here like this, but I always keep my word. Monty?
You think you can get away from everything?
No.
You think, especially when you get blamed and you never get blamed for nothing?
No!
Get off of her. Get out of here! You go on that side of there. Lock yourself up. It's not safe to have you around.
I'm much obliged, Mr. Hooper.
You called me Alonzo this afternoon.
Alonzo?
I'm not one bit afraid of you. But I hate how you are unkind to animals and that you abuse your children.
I would never hurt you. It's not my fault. I act the way that I do. I can control it for a while like I did this afternoon, and it comes back stronger than ever. I love my wife, but I couldn't help but tear up her flower garden this afternoon. Don't you understand? And I love my children. Would I torment them if I didn't? What would you do if you were me?
Where on earth have you been?
It isn't Jefferson tonight or any other night. But he's been so wonderful. I thought it would be a little solace for him to see me in your lovely moonlit woods. Just think of hopelessly caring for someone and not having them to yourself for an instant.
I should call it prolonging the agony for the poor fellow.
Monty was there, Monty Blair, and he was drinking too much. He grabbed me and he shouted, but at that very moment, Alonzo came over, took him off me, and locked him in the cider mill. And then Alonzo and I had a conversation. And Martha, he really wants to be a decent man.
You haven't known Alonzo Hupper as long as I have. He has a sort of low cunning.
Nothing to eat.
Martha evidently doesn't like to load down her table with good things to eat.
Nothing to eat.
I was dining the other night with some very fashionable and important people on Commonwealth Avenue. These people are not usually in town during the summer, of course, but they just returned from the season in London. And they had neither bread nor butter on their table. Oh.
Guess I'd think twice about going back to eat there. However, I do like style.
Everything's in proper order.
Yes.
Be careful with that plate,
That's one of the great sorrows of my life.
Difficult to have the other house.
There you go.
I have another.
You know those two precious nobodies left town, and young Windsor is back.
When did he get here?
Last night. He's staying at the tavern this time. I saw him at breakfast, and I took it upon myself to invite him over this afternoon.
Franklin, is it really you?
I'd rather think it is.
Father, have you come?
Hello there.
Franklin!
Why, hello there, Dana. Oh, my Rumply. Ooh.
I think you forgot to speak to Hannah.
Well, for heaven's sake, Hannah.
Very nicely, thank you, Mr. Upa.
And my sister Ruth.
Now here's a little girl that dared grow up. Breakfast ready? I'm hungry as a hunter.
How would you know how hungry hunters are when you think it is wicked to go out and kill things?
Thank you.
This will be the greatest museum in the world if that is possible. This is my other house, a mansion for all people. Say, what's in that dish?
Oatmeal was.
Well, put it back. I haven't had it.
You ate half of it, my dear.
So I did. Dear Father, yesterday I picked raspberries in the forenoon and huckle in the after. When are you coming? Your loving son, Dana.
Oh, Dad.